The number of people who report being abducted by aliens is growing at an alarming rate. According to a recent Roper poll, 1 in every 50 Americans claims a UFO abduction experience. Well, now those individuals are being joined by groups of people who claim they've been abducted together. These mass abductions are challenging skeptics who believe the abduction phenomenon is all a hoax.
In the course of 4 years, as a group, we were abducted about 60 times or so.
In my experience, I believe that mass abductions are occurring far more than people realize.
A whole room full of people were simultaneously taken and simultaneously in the craft put together with one another.
James LEFANTE and a group of his close friends claim to be victims of a mass abduction. Their abduction histories all began in childhood.
Ever since I was a child, I used to wake up and I used to see white light and shadowy figures moving around my bed, and I would get scared.
When I was younger, I remember like an alien looking through the windows, being watched, a feeling of being watched all the time.
When I was a little kid, I guess I can call them as like the shadow people, because they used to come out of the shadows, and like the shadows would kind of come alive, and they'd be these little small guys.
In his mid-20s, LEFANTE felt strangely compelled to seek out certain people and befriend them. As these home videos show, the group often went camping in upstate New York.
We would go up each weekend to upstate in Saugerties, and we were just going up for fun, but as it turns out, week by week, we were all being abducted as a group.
And looking back at it now, I realized that I had knew all these people from childhood abductions, and that I was supposed to get everybody together and go up to the trailer to be abducted.
Noted ufologist Bud Hopkins met with LEFANTE and used hypnosis to help him recall abduction memories.
It's like I'm on a table. They have big eyes and the skin looks molded. I gotta get out of here.
James LEFANTE contacted me in 1990 because of certain fragmented memories. He'd been with a group of friends, and they knew something had happened. There was a time lapse. And subsequently, they began to have partial recollections of this experience. And part of those recollections involved having been in a craft, unable to move, being controlled, and being placed, some of them with others, in some kind of sexual situation.
I first met James in '87, and a few friends of us, we all went upstate to the trailer. Just have a nice weekend and enjoy ourselves and have fun.
We had a typical hanging out, everybody getting close together, talking, doing a little music together. And then the next morning, everybody recalled something happened.
Going up weekly almost became an addiction. It was for enjoyment, but it was almost like we were being called back.
More members of the group agreed to participate in regression therapy. Under hypnosis, they recalled being part of a mass abduction.
And one time in the trailer, it was around 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock, and I remember seeing these bright lights almost in every window, and there's domes on top of the trailer. And everything was glowing, and just become basically paralyzed. During the abduction, we would walk down this dark, dark road in a trance state.
Mostly everybody was like semi-conscious. I would see us, like all of us, walking down the road in our night garments. And sometimes the aliens would walk us there, and sometimes we would be walking on our own. And we'd be walking to the craft, which was always in the same spot in this pit area.
We would just walk into the ship. We would see the ship in the pit. James would be the last one to go inside the ship.
When the nightmarish memories persisted, LEFANTE and others in his group sought help from clinical psychologist Dr. John BOWMAN.
Generally, when I work with people using their imagination, there's a personalized stamp that people put into their imagery because it's being generated from a part of themselves. These abductees and their reports do not have this kind of personalized stamp, and I think it makes it even more credible.
Once this group was on the ship, they do remember being abducted together. They do see each other physically being examined by their abductors.
James and Kurt saw me on the ship with them and a few other people that were upstate that weekend with us.
They would take us into the room and start doing some of the medical experiments. And sometimes there would be 2 or 3 of us in the same room.
And something was being worked on my genitals. I would see James across the room, and the same thing being done to him. I do know his sperm was removed.
I've experienced certain things like that. I was with an alien that wasn't totally at will. It's hard to explain, you know, I mean, first, you know, it looks like a person, you know, and then it becomes an alien while the process is going on.
Rows and rows of naked people, aliens standing, motioning them here and there, directing them through some kind of processing.
When I was on the ship, I remember seeing James and Petra, and then I remember being with the other people from the group.
There's a very great interest on the part of the UFO occupants in human reproduction, sperm, ova, the DNA, but it has also included an interest in human sexuality itself.
I do know that they do need our genes to propagate their own species.
It's not uncommon here in mass abduction cases that individuals, members of the group, are forced to have sex amongst themselves or with the aliens.
Sometimes we'd be abducted and there would be sexual situations that would pair off, you know, some of us within our group and some of us with other groups of people. It was just like a random thing. Each week maybe it would be a different person.
It could be other people's wives, other people's husbands, different friends that we were with, and just experiencing different sexual situations with them.
It's a recurring theme that we hear from a lot of abductees, especially in mass abduction situations. They're studying us, they're studying our sexuality, our emotions, and they're using us for some design goal as the center of this experiment.
This is across all cultural, socioeconomic levels. This is extraordinarily widespread. It is global in nature, and it is probably the most central hidden mental health issue in the country today.
In working with abductees, James's group, as well as other abductees, my experience is that these people have been traumatized by a very real and present experience in their lives. Their psychological profiles indicate that this was a real traumatic experience. It wasn't made up, it wasn't imagined, and that something actually did occur to traumatize these people.
I lost plenty of jobs, I lost friends, I lost family, I lost a number of things, and it got to the point where I would, you know, I was contemplating suicide in a sense because there was no escape.
I believe the abductions are exploitive of mankind and are not beneficial to these individuals. If their abductions were beneficial, they wouldn't be suffering as they are.
It's not something that we come out and tell you because we want to be on television. A lot of people think that, you know, we get more ridicule from it. It's a joke.
There is undoubtedly an extraordinary phenomenon at work here. It is irresponsible to dismiss it. An extraordinary phenomenon such as this demands an extraordinary investigation.
We're a good group. Our friendship is strong. I just hope that we'll understand what's going on at some time, and that we will understand why it's being done to us, and that in the long run that it's all for a good cause.
Joining us now is one of the foremost authorities on the alien abduction phenomenon, Temple University professor David Jacobs. Dr. Jacobs is the author of Secret Life, First-Hand Accounts of UFO Abductions, and has been a UFO researcher for 25 years. Dr. Jacobs, for years and years, you have studied the abduction phenomenon. The idea of multiple abductions, is this something new?
No, multiple abductions have been around since the very beginning. In fact, the very first abduction that came to public attention, the Barney and Betty Hill case, was a multiple abduction. What we see every once in a while is large-scale abductions of 6, 7, 8 people, even more sometimes.
Is it true that people only recall their abduction experience, multiple or otherwise, under hypnosis, and therefore they might be influenced by their therapist?
Most of the accounts are recalled under hypnosis. However, a significant number of them are remembered just straight out without any aid of hypnosis at all. However, we found that handled carefully and with proper knowledge of the phenomenon, hypnosis is an important tool that we use to sort of release the memories that are there.
You are a respected university professor, and for most people, this is just beyond the pale. Why are you involved in this?
Well, you're right, Tim. This is absolutely as far out as one can get in this society. Yet I feel that this is, even though that this is on the edges of credibility, that we must study this, that this is potentially extremely important and potentially impactful on all people, and therefore we can't ignore it.
Does it seem that some individuals are targeted for abduction and others are not? And is there any way to know if you are?
Well, people who have had abduction experiences generally have them from childhood on, all the way through old age, and we don't know how it stops. Most people who are abductees know that there's been a series of unusual experiences that have happened to them in their lifetime. They don't know what's happened to them necessarily, but they know something has been going on that other people don't have. And most of those kinds of people, we feel, have had abduction experiences, or at least many of those people have had abduction experiences.
Have you been abducted?
I have not been abducted. From what I know about the abduction phenomenon, I have no desire to be abducted.
You meet a stranger and something about them is familiar. You know each other from somewhere, you just can't figure out where. When that happened to two women in Virginia, they racked their brains for more than a year and finally came up with an unsettling answer. They believe that, as children, they shared an alien abduction experience. At first, they were fragments of memory. As a child, Claire Holcomb had pastoral visions. Sometimes they were strange, sometimes they were disturbing, and later on they became terrifying. She never knew what it meant until she was an adult. In 1987, Claire was looking for a career change. She responded to an ad for full-time help on a horse farm. Her interview with ranch owner Diana Graves was a turning point.
It was sort of, I know this person, and she was very comfortable around the horses, and it was sort of an instant recognition, and I hired her that day.
I felt when I first met Diana that I must have met her somewhere before or seen her somewhere before. I felt that I knew her quite well, but I couldn't explain that.
Claire worked at the ranch for 4 years before she and Diana figured out their connection. It started on a dark country road.
On my way home, fairly early in the evening, it was a warm night for December, I saw lights in the sky I thought were low-flying aircraft, but I wasn't hearing any sounds, engine noises, and was concerned that perhaps the engines had shut down. I pulled over to the side of the road and was blinded by these lights. But I was frozen to the spot. I didn't know what was happening.
Right after her sighting, Claire raced home, feeling sick, scared, and disoriented.
I think both of us thought she was going crazy. Too much stress that, maybe she'd had a blackout. We couldn't explain the missing time. We didn't know what it was at the time.
The first thing that I noticed from that first experience was that my contact lenses appeared to be missing from my eyes. And I certainly had them in when I was driving.
Diana encouraged Claire to try and put the bizarre events behind her. But days later, Claire had another bizarre encounter.
She was reporting to me that she seemed to have seen some strange things. She had memories of this weird hand that she drew.
Sorry.
And for some reason, I knew we needed help. I knew I could no longer handle it.
They got that help through the Fund for UFO Research, an organization that investigates extraterrestrial events and tries to separate fact from fantasy. They felt Claire was exhibiting signs of a classic abduction.
And many of the things she said, while not completely unique, were disturbing things that I had read about before, and I had no reason to think that she was making the thing up or that it was being fabricated in any way.
It was startling to us that anybody could possibly have experienced these things, and we've never heard about it.
The abduction syndrome is essentially this pattern that you do get from collecting data from a large number of people, and it has all of these common features, the fundamental one being missing time. Then there are others, the markings, the very strange medical problems that they often develop.
Along with Claire's health problems, Diana noticed that her employee was also seeing some health benefits. Claire's eyesight dramatically improved after her first abduction. Strangely, Diana's health started following the same course.
My eyes had improved dramatically, and I could think of no other rational explanation why my eyesight was also improving, unless I too was being abducted.
Diana wanted to know more and chose hypnotherapy as a way to retrieve her abduction memories. Her first session was traumatic.
And sure enough, the first memory I had, I was screaming because I had alien eyes right in front of my face, and I couldn't get away from them.
What are they doing to you? What are they doing to you?
Doing something to my head.
You're okay. The way the events occur, I'm very convinced that she has experienced something, and what seems to be happening seems to be really truly happening to her. She has the marks on her body.
Under hypnosis, Claire was also recalling vivid memories of torture, experimentation, and forced reproduction.
We'd had some severe ice storms. It'd been bitter cold. As is often the case, I was abducted from my bedroom. I had a nightgown on with no shoes. Naturally, I didn't sleep in my shoes. And when I was brought back, they made a mistake, which they sometimes do. And instead of putting me back in the house, they left me outside. When I thought I was going to die, the aliens came back, picked me up, and put me back in the house, in my bedroom. But the next morning, all the skin on the bottom of my feet had been burned off from sticking to the ice.
My conscious memory abductions are very fragmentary. I'll have a little bit of a memory of actually seeing a gray standing beside my bed at night, or being poked in the back. I'll have a memory of seeing either a blue or an orange light fill my room.
The women could not escape the relentless fear that accompanied their abduction experiences. They sought help from world-renowned abduction expert Bud Hopkins.
They were extremely impressive, articulate, obviously filled with a lot of emotion about their experiences. There was a lot of anger, a lot of fear, and I was just extremely impressed with them.
While discussing and comparing their separate abduction memories, Claire and Diana made a dramatic discovery.
We were both in a large room, and scenes were being projected, very disturbing scenes of devastation. We were told to watch it and to learn from it and to understand that these things were happening. We were, in fact, holding each other's hand.
Well, the issue of shared abductions is something we should sort out here. Many, many, many people are abducted with other abductees.
The women probed deeper into their past. Claire recalled a childhood abduction memory that she had shared with a little girl visiting from England.
When I was about 12 years old and had been on a picnic with some friends from school, I moved off by myself to sit on a bench. For some reason, I saw a little girl coming toward me that I didn't at the time recognize, and she was wearing a blue uniform. She had some kind of an accent that I thought might be British. Without stopping to think or discuss why we were doing this, we both meandered away from the picnic area into the woods, and were subsequently abducted from that clearing together.
The girl she was describing sounded like me when I was about the same age. And when Claire described to me what this other little English girl was wearing, I then went to the closet and pulled out a jacket that exactly matched her description.
She described to me how she used to dress going to school in England at that time, and I didn't know she'd attended school in England when she was 9 years old.
I was that other child.
We found a pattern that they had been abducted since childhood, separately, brought together, and made to interact as if the aliens were interested in human relationships and human friendships.
I'm completely convinced that they have planned Claire and my meeting since they started, since we were such small children.
I think it's amazing that we met again in this life, in this world. Although I can't explain it.
Her coming to this farm 5 years ago was a coincidence. They arranged it, they planned it. I don't know why they planned it. I'm glad we met, but they planned it.
The issue of alien abduction has come under fire lately from mental health professionals who believe abductees are being manipulated through directed therapy and hypnosis. But the number of people who claim an abduction experience is growing, and they're not all going to the same therapists. National statistics indicate that as many as 2 million Americans may have had experiences consistent with an alien abduction.